chief of staff, okay, at the headquarters, and it says, rewarding such comments as these is always a special pleasure, particularly when I know the risks, dangers, etc. cited are typical of your daily performance. Your blank mission exemplifies the singular courage and will to blank, 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 blank. I have blank, blank, blank. The president has been informed of the results of blank, blank and has directed that you be awarded the blank, 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 blank Legion of Merit. Allow me to add my own personal thanks for representing us and your country so well. That's from the chief of staff at the headquarters. And that's on top of the one from the general, and it says subject. See, that's eradicated. And then in the center, it has his name. Then in the center, it says paragraph 1 and 2 deleted for classification. Then it has a signature block. And then the originator guy, the guy who actually wrote it up, was Billy R. Enman. He was the Vice Admiral of the United States Navy and Director of the National Security Agency. And that has the same thing. Even the date's blocked out in the title, and it says paragraph 1 and 2 deleted for classification. So I don't know what I got it for. Is that crazy? That's totally crazy. That's the Army for you. Anyway, and people are always asking, what do you do besides finding missing kids or saving kidnap victims or whatever? And I have something. I worked 6 years for Dr. Ronald Bryan. I'm sorry. He was the head of the physics department at Texas A&M College Station. I didn't know I was working for him, but I did a target for him that was 0.5, 1 and 0.5 to 10 to the minus 37. That's a particle so small, the CERN reactor would have to be doubled in size. Or the CERN accelerator, I'm sorry. Would have to be doubled in size to see. So remote viewing can get pretty small. That was a big, long project. Anyway.
Welcome, friends and fellow travelers, to a very special episode of our podcast. This episode is coming to you from somewhere around the ceiling because Jose and I have been floating up there ever since we found out that we would get to spend time with our next guest. Isn't that right, Jose? We've
Yes.
pretty much been doing nonstop cartwheels ever since we found out. So I would like to give the privilege of introducing our next guest to my wonderful co-host. Jose, if you please.
Thank you. Joe McMoneagle is known for his work with the United States government remote viewing program. Joe is a kind-hearted, loving, humble man. He is a loving husband, father, and honorable man who served in the United States Army for 20 years. During a combat tour in Vietnam, his helicopter was hit with a projectile. Joe fell from an elevated position, severely fracturing his spine. Joe's physical injuries did not stop him from continuing his service. He served 15 years in intelligence and 13 years overseas. Joe is a decorated veteran who has received numerous military awards and decorations, including the Legion of Merit. Joe has written several books on remote viewing: Mind Trek, The Ultimate Time Machine, Remote Viewing Secrets, The Stargate Chronicles, Memoirs of a Psychic Spy. To this day, Joe continues to be involved as an instructor in the training of remote viewing at the Monroe Institute. Joe is a friend of the late Robert Monroe and has been with the Monroe Institute since its inception. Joe is a legend, a good man with a golden heart. It is an honor having him with us here today. Ladies and gentlemen, remote viewer number one, Mr. Joe McMoneagle. Welcome, Joe, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's only going to take the rest of my life to live up to all that.
Well, Joe, I just want to take a moment to say something. We really appreciate you taking the time to be on our little show. I'm feeling really spoiled. I've already gotten to spend 2 weeks with you at the Monroe Institute, learning remote viewing from you and getting to hear all your stories. And it's always a privilege to spend time with you. We consider you a legend in the field. And it pains me to see you described in a tabloid as CIA psychic spy, not only because it's not technically correct, but because there's so much more to your life than just that label. I really want to stress to people, you spent a great deal of your military career well before remote viewing, doing extensive work in Army intelligence. You're a Vietnam veteran who actually can talk about the experience of living through the Tet Offensive. And our show is very much a friend to our veterans. We have very personal connections to veterans. We have veterans out there among our listeners. And I just wanted to take a moment to recognize and appreciate your service. So thank you.
Thank you for your service, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, I asked people what the last war was, or one of the last wars, and they list, Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam. I said, oh, you missed one, and that's the Cold War. A lot of people don't know that went on for, 1950s, early 1950s, until just recently, just as recent as maybe 8 years ago. And that cost lives, and a lot of people worked in that it took a lot of effort. It was more than just a memory, that sort of thing. But I appreciate what you said, and I always feel like I'm representing all the people I know that aren't here, and the ones that are, who got the best revenge and have great granddaughters and great grandsons, which is the best kind of revenge. Anyway, thank you.
So one of the things we like to do on our show is to take the opportunity to clear up some of our favorite misconceptions. So right off the bat, I want to tackle the big one. So the younger TikTok generation has come across the CIA declassified documents about Project Gateway, which has led to an interesting misconception where people believe that the CIA studied OBEs, how to have them, that there's a CIA program called the Gateway Process, that they've proved OBEs exist. So I want you to set the record straight and talk about how these various reports about the Monroe Institute, OBEs, the Gateway Program, ended up being filed with the CIA, and why there's no mystery behind that so-called missing page 25.
Okay, that's easy. Gateway is the original program that the entire Monroe Institute was designed around. It used a number of different tapes that carried audio sounds and music and things, that was developed by Robert Monroe, who was the man who wrote Journeys Out of the Body. He sort of introduced the idea of spontaneous out of bodies to the world. The difference being that he designed this program, this Gateway program, in order to help people do whatever it was they were doing in their everyday lives, like their work, their passions, whatever their hobbies might be. If they were into music, sculpture, painting, cutting grass, it didn't matter. He thought that he could make these tasks and things a lot better and a lot more creative. And so he developed the Gateway program. And the entire reason for the Gateway program was to show people that they were way more than just their physical representation. In other words, there were things that they could do creatively, or in their social realities, or in the way they connected with other people, to include even their enemies, what they would consider their enemies, that was more positive and constructive than the norm. And it has a massive effect on people who come to a gateway because they go away knowing that they're more than their physical body. They also go away knowing that they can be far more creative and positive in their lives, and it improves their lives considerably. I know I took 2 gateways in the residential format because that's all they had back then. I couldn't do anything else. But my boss always said, and was after I was in the remote viewing program, he said, for some reason, when we send you down there to TMI, you always come back mellow and a lot easier to get along with. So I conned him into believing that. I said he would send me down there more than once. I also took the non-residential program. Back then, they had a double folder. I think it was 12 tapes involved, and it took about a year to finish it home. And they're just now going back to something like that, which is, I think, just a wonderful thing. Because it sometimes is too expensive for some people, to come for the residential, or they have to come too far, like our friends from Australia or New Zealand, China, maybe different places where they have to travel for 2 days just to get here. So that's being worked on. But the gateway was just to make you a better person. Now, there was a period where General Bert Stubblebine, who was the commander of INSCOM, the Intelligence and Security Command, decided that it would open the mind of some of his intelligence officers, some of his analysts and things at the headquarters. And so he wanted to bring as many of his officers from the headquarters to TMI. So what Bob did, he made a deal with them. He recreated the Gateway program as a more instructive kind of learning program. And the general brought his officers from the headquarters, almost all of them, in fact. And they enjoyed what was close to a gateway. It actually wasn't a full gateway, but it helped to open their minds to be more creative and industrious with their analysis and thinking that went into their processes in the headquarters for intelligence. And that was actually not a bad thing. It worked very well. The CIA, on the other hand, never had anything at all to do with any of that. It was the U.S. Army only, and only the people who volunteered to get involved with what General Bert Stubblebine thought was important. And it turns out it made a tremendous difference on some of their analysis and the ways of thinking in the intelligence arena. So that's the extent of it. The CIA was involved in the first year and a half, maybe, of the existence of the investigation, the initial investigation into remote viewing. That was basically it. It was their money that actually started the first investigation. It was only for about a year. They used people who were considered to be psychic at the outset. None of them were CIA employees. They pitched in, I think it was probably at the most $125,000, maybe a little more. And that doesn't last long in research, let me tell you. But that's about it. And then they pulled back from it, and it was the Army that stepped in 1978. They were getting involved in the countering the Russian threat using psychics, and that sort of brought them into brought the remote viewing into the limelight, and that's what they got connected with back then.
Right, and there's no great mystery there, especially with that missing page. Yeah.
No. In fact, the page is missing simply because somebody misplaced it. Everybody I know, and I have a copy of that report. We all have that missing page in our copy, but mine is like in a folder and it's stapled together. So I didn't lose mine.
So, what was your first Gateway seminar like, and have you taken any of the other seminars since?
The only thing I ever took was the Gateway, and of course, I teach the remote viewing. There's a introduction kind of remote viewing one, and then there's a follow-on remote viewing two, where we add a number of things that don't generally are not generally known to go along with remote viewing, like dowsing, that sort of thing. I went. The first thing I did was the home gateway, or the home. I can't remember what they even called it back then, but it was kind of like a gateway on tapes, and they had a very specific way you took it, and you used the tapes at home when you weren't doing anything else. Maybe your hobby or something, and I got a profound improvement out of it in terms of my ability to have an open mind in thinking. I came up with ideas that I would never have been able to do otherwise. That I spent about a year on, and then I found out by being brought in on it that there was an operation. It was a special project called Gondola Wish. Gondola Wish was looking at a myriad of things in the I hesitate to say paranormal world, because it wasn't just that. It was like they were looking at improvements in intelligence collection and whatnot through a whole bunch of different methodologies. And Skip Atwater, Frederick Holmes Atwater, was a first lieutenant at the time, and that was kind of his bailiwick. He had his focus on that area, and that he heard about the remote viewing that was being done at Stanford Research, because it wasn't classified. It was just sort of confidential, not being spread around, because it involved psychics and the paranormal, and nobody wanted to be connected to it. So his boss was a Major Keener, and he approached Major Keener and said, "We need to develop something maybe to look into this," because at the time we were starting to pick up information on the intelligence vine, if you will, that the Chinese and Russia and some of the other Iron Bloc countries were investigating or spending some time in the paranormal area. And when you find that out, you need to determine whether or not it's a direct threat to the country. And so they have a whole special process they go through to do that. So it was recommended that that Skip Atwater and Major Keener felt that it was important enough to investigate to make sure it wasn't a threat. So it was actually that special project Gondola Wish that got them involved in talking to Stanford and whatnot, and make a proposal to actually train some remote viewers, and then use them to target our own stuff and have it independently evaluated to determine what kind of a threat remote viewing might actually be. That was the whole process. It just got carried away. I mean, it worked so well in the test that we were inundated with requirements, and it wound up, instead of a couple of years, it wound up being over 20 years that it operated.
Which speaks for itself. Another one of my big pet peeves, or something I learned in the first day of remote viewing, is that it's not what people assume it to be. They think that remote viewing is the same as clairvoyance, that in effect you're seeing with your mind's eye the exact picture of what you're targeting, as if your awareness is a remotely operating camera. And people are very scared. People are very scared of this concept. Now, clairvoyance is a separate skill. It does exist, but remote viewing is a bit more formally defined than that. And I learned in your class that getting better at remote viewing does not mean that ultimately I will get a clear visual picture of the target. So could you talk a little bit about that misconception? And do you have any other misconceptions about remote viewing that bother you?
Yeah, yeah. Remote viewing is a lot of things to a lot of people, and most of it's not remote viewing. Excuse me. Um, one of the things about remote viewing is the title's bad. It implies that you're actually going to see something. And that's the last thing that's ever going to happen in remote viewing. I've done literally thousands and thousands of remote viewings for now 48 years. And I might have actually seen the target 6 times, 7 times in that entire period. No, remote viewing is actually probably comes out of a mechanism that all humans have, which is the ability to know danger when it's around them or when they're in that environment, and it's kind of a defensive thing. It's almost animalistic. You know when you're in danger, and you know how to back away from it to stay alive, and that, of course, is way down in the very base region of sensing. One of the things that you learn in the first hour of remote viewing is that it's not about seeing anything; it's about sensing something, and that means using all of your senses: taste, smell, touch, um, imagination, emotion, everything about you that would be a warning system for a threat. And so the idea that you see something is wrong. And the first thing people want to do, of course, is cover their eyes, so they can get a nice dark area to see that picture of the target. And what that does is it shuts all the other senses down, because you're spending so much of your energy looking for something, you forget about the smell and the taste and the touch and all that sort of thing. So remote viewing is not about learning anything new in terms of methodology or technique. We all already possess it. It's about unlearning the bad habits that get in the way of actually doing remote viewing. And those bad habits, unfortunately, are established from birth. Everybody we come in contact with as we're growing up, from the very day we first take our deep breath on this planet, is taught to us by our parents, our friends, our teachers, our professors, priests, advisors, even our enemies. We learn things from in terms of thinking. And that process of thinking is got to be quick in this world, because it's the threat that usually kicks it off. So in a normal thought process, the information we get is going to be fairly paltry. It's not going to be a lot of information. So we have to combine the few items of reality that we collect into some kind of a picture and make an assumption, and then we usually jump to a conclusion about what's going on. In remote viewing, it's the exact opposite. You don't want to be trying to jump to a conclusion. You don't want to mess up those very basic sensing ideas that are coming in. So where you might get a sense of water and a sense of a big tub, you would leap to the conclusion that you're looking at a boat, when in reality you could be looking at something floating in a fountain somewhere. You have to stop thinking in the way that you normally think, and you have to unlearn those habits and develop brand new habits that don't thwart the remote viewing, the sensing. It's a hard thing to do. And unfortunately, if you have a room full of people, there are not two people in the whole room that think the same way. So it's extremely hard to teach.
Well, that's what I felt like half of my time as a student of yours was coming to terms with that you expect to be bad at it, but what you don't expect is to be good at it. You have us remote viewing on day one, and it is scary. It's scary finding out that this is something that we all can do. And
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that process as a student is learning how your conscious mind decodes data that you're receiving from your subconscious. You're learning how your own
Right.
brain works.
Exactly. And what happens is your subconscious, which is trying to communicate something to you, has no language of its own. So it has to borrow from your memory and a whole bunch of other stuff. And so if you get the impression of a backyard swimming pool, the one thing I can say about it, it's not going to be a backyard swimming pool. That's an impression that it gives you, so that you get the idea that maybe it's something in the ground, the container in the ground, or maybe it's a container to hold some kind of a fluid. But you have to like break that down, tear that entire thought process apart, and determine by testing in your own mind, testing each of those beliefs, and discard the parts of the backyard swimming pool that don't make any sense or are wrong, that you feel are wrong, and keep only the little bits and pieces about the overall image that makes sense, or that you feel are probably part of the actual identity of what it is you're looking at. And so there's no formal nouns. You can't name something, because if you're naming something, you're naming it from a conclusion that's built on probably two or three bits of information, which is totally insufficient. Uh, but the information, the base information itself, because it is the foundational parts of an actual target, are extremely important, because they only happen in combinations with other facts. You can have a very small handful of facts that when they're looked at in the right way with an open mind, you can see by comparing them to the probabilities of the answer, which of that probability of the answer is correct versus the other things which are shills or wrong. It's a really interesting process. And the neat thing about it is, once you've developed that understanding with your subconscious, and you have gained some modicum of control of your ego, which I would throw in there, you can actually produce data that's extremely helpful in decision making.
Well, that's why you drill us so much on working on those, dismissing those analytic overlays, because we have that tendency to want to go in and label what we're seeing. One of the students at our group
Right.
was really trying to avoid labeling things as playground equipment. She was seeing things that looked like playground equipment, and it ended up being a really spectacular viewing. I think it ended up being windmills. But we
Right.
had a good
Right.
laugh about
Exactly.
it later in the week, because we did an outing and we ended up
Yeah.
on the playground equipment in the back, and so we were joking with her, here, we're closing your loop.
Yeah. And what was interesting, I think I remember that particular remote viewing, but what's interesting about it is what starts out as the playground equipment winds up being matched exactly to the actual target photograph that was in a sealed envelope. And that's important, because let's say in the application of remote viewing, you have a possibility of maybe 5 or 6 or even 100 locations where they might be holding a kidnapped victim. And if the very raw base foundational statements about the target match only one of those places, and in reality it's the best match for that one place, you're probably in the right location for where the hostage is being held.
And along those lines, it's important not to omit details. I did a viewing where I was picking up on it looked like elongated propeller shapes, white propeller shapes. And I was picking up on a detail of
Mhm.
heat. It felt like a sun reflection. And I didn't put it in. I just didn't feel that it was applicable. And the target ended up being candles, long white candles. So I was picking up on.
Yeah. Got that propeller shape. Yeah, but there's other things there that might have, that would help in terms of the foundational details, like it's soft or it goes somewhere around the foot, that kind of thing. Uh, I've seen actual single words come out of a remote viewer that saved lives. Uh, General Dozier is a good example. Some of the input for General Dozier after he was taken by the Rope Brigada was just absolutely mind blowing. The friend of mine said that he had a sense that this apartment building where they were holding him had a number of entries. And of course, you go in the wrong entry, you take a second and a half too long getting to him, he's probably going to be killed. And he worked and worked and worked on it. And he came in the next day and he said, for some reason, all I keep getting is a rose garden. And it just happened that an elderly woman living in that building had put a rose, she was on the ground floor and she put a rose garden in front of her apartment. So that's the door they used. And I don't think, if they had used any other door, I don't think he would have survived. Small things like that become critically important. And that's the whole idea behind remote viewing, is being able to pick the one straw in the pile of straws that is the most important one. And you don't need a lot of information to do that. You just need super accurate information uh, when you start doing those kinds of things.
And we were talking a bit about when the ego starts to play in. So I just wanted, I just wanted to talk a little bit about that line between intuition and imagination. So when I'm doing any sort of focus level work, altered state work, my imagination is helpful to me as a catalyst. I put myself in the focus level. I might start to imagine a room, and then I say to myself, what does that room look like if someone comes in? What are they wearing? What might they say? And as I go deeper into the levels, imagination gives way to input, especially as my conscious mind goes to sleep or is put aside. And, that's well and good. But remote viewing is a bit more difficult in that regard. It's more grounded in the physical, and it can be more of a struggle to tame your ego and get it to not confabulate.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of people miss the point entirely. What I think that comes from the usually the very good success you have with the first remote viewing you ever have done in your entire life. If it's done right and you're completely blind and everybody in the room with you is completely blind to the target, and you come up with the data that allows the actual target to be picked out of a group of targets, it kind of catches you by surprise. But I think the reason that happens when you do the first target in your whole life is because the ego, that inner voice that wants to be in charge of everything, it sees what's going on, and your ego goes, I don't know what's actually happening here, and I'm not going to be the failure in this, so I'm going to back away and just kind of observe. And it allows the first thing that pops in your head, it allows you to put that down because you have no egotistical involvement in concluding anything. Anything gets in the way, and nothing does. And so it turns out that it's a really good piece of data. You get a really good result. You get excited because you got a really great remote viewing result. And then the ego says, oh, now I know what's happening. I'm taking control back now, and I'm going to tell you how we're going to do this, and we're going to make it better. And the ego keeps driving you back to the old way of thinking, the old conclusion making. You gotta know what it is with just two or three facts, and it just screws everything up. And so it's a war with the ego, and unfortunately, it never goes away. I can tell you that from 48 years of warring with my ego.
Yeah, that second morning of remote viewing is pretty notoriously bad, but it's such an important lesson. You need to go through that. So I wouldn't count your remote viewing on day 2 very much, but so what made you decide to even start teaching remote viewing at Monroe, and what have you learned about teaching it? Has your teaching style evolved over the years that you've done it?
Well, it's a number of things going on in my life at the time. Um, I had this problem in Vietnam where I was pretty beat up, and it I wound up I had what's called compression fractures all over my body. It was from getting blown out of a helicopter, and when I landed in a sitting position. So all of my spine, all my major joints, everything in my body had been compression fractured. So I recovered from that fine, but over the years, my body started breaking down significantly. And so I was having a lot of surgery, and the surgery gets in the way of viewing and the pain, especially. And I was getting tired. I had been, you don't want to do any drugs, and pain meds or drugs. They basically dull you out. So, in order to participate in the Stargate program for 7 years in the Army, I was taking a minimal amount of pain control. So I was using everything from meditation to massages to you name it, acupuncture, whatever it took to control the pain while I was doing the viewing. The last 2 years I was in the Army, I was the only one of the original 6 viewers left, and they weren't having a lot of success in teaching the new viewers. So it's one of the main reasons I retired. But over the years, they followed me into I wanted to go to the science side anyway because I knew I wasn't getting a lot of information out of the research. They for some reason they made a decision in the Army unit, the Stargate unit. They made a decision that the science people don't really understand collection or the methodologies of collection, which have nothing to do with remote viewing. It's just the methods of collection. And so they made a decision not to complicate the remote viewing that was being done by us in the Army side in the Stargate program. So we had no contact with the research, and we were not being given any of that research. I happen to know that the research was important from talking to some of the people that I knew were connected to it. And so when I retired from the Army and was asked to work in the research side, I accepted. So I was there for the rest of the time it was in Stanford Research Institute, working as a subject that they could study. At the same time, because I was the last of the original 6 viewers, a number of the agencies that I've been supporting followed me. And so I kept getting tasking for operational reasons. So I was kind of doing both. And when they closed the program at Stanford Research and moved it to Science Applications International Corporation, SAIC, I went with it. I went from SRI to SAIC. And then in 95, when the CIA terminated the Stargate program, I was let go at SAIC and I went straight into Laboratories for Fundamental Research, which was the personal lab of Dr. May. So I wound up continuing to support the collection side as well as participating in the research side for, I think I was in the research side 41 years total. And so it was only recently, a year and a half ago, when I retired. Now, I had to quit remote viewing because I could no longer be used for research. And there's a really interesting reason why. If Dr. May wants to wire me up to a 128 channel bilateral EEG and see what goes on in my brain while I'm doing a remote viewing, he has to really sneak up on me. Because if he says, Joe, get a lot of rest tonight, we're going to hook you up to the bilateral EEG in the morning, and we're going to do a really important remote viewing. Well, I've already got the answer. I've been doing it so long and so repetitively that I don't think about it anymore. It just happens. I start getting information as soon as I know there's a target. So I couldn't do the research anymore, but I was really good at carrying on with the tasking for the collection. It just, I got tired. 48 years of remote viewing is a lot. And so I decided to retire. So I quit the remote viewing altogether completely. And right about that time, Skip Atwater, my original training officer, who had been working at the Monroe Institute after he retired, decided he was going to quit. So the administration at the Monroe Institute came and asked me if I would take up the training requirements. What I was not particularly happy with the training requirements because the design of the training was carried over from the remnants of Stanford Research. That was a training program developed by Ingo Swann. It was not accepted by anyone in the research side as being an effective training methodology because it violated a number of principles in the actual protocol for remote viewing. For instance, the idea that you have to be completely and totally blind. And I felt that took something away from people who wanted to become remote viewers. It took away that sort of that magical bump you get when you suddenly realize that you're so far beyond physical that you can actually produce accurate information on something you know absolutely nothing about, and anybody in the room with you knows nothing. It does something to you philosophically that has a tremendous impact on your understanding that you really can do these things. And that was missing out of any other form of training. So I said I would do the training. I'd take over where Skip Atwater left off. But I was going to completely restructure the training to acknowledge the fact that everyone is blind when a remote viewing is done. That's the remote viewers, the monitor, anybody that's in the room with them. No one can know what the target is because I wanted that simple little fact in there to surprise people when they were able to do a good remote viewing and produce valid data where a actual target could be taken out of a number of targets correctly. I knew what that would do to people philosophically. And it's hard to train anyway because there's no two people that think alike. But so I saw that as like the key issue in training. So I designed a training program around that. And I wouldn't change that for all the money in China now because it really has that exact effect when people first discover that they're magical entities, that they really can do something that's totally impossible.
So, Joe, you were talking about how you do remote viewing pretty instantaneously in body these days. So I found that in learning the Monroe system and the various ways to expand one's awareness, it really doesn't matter the form it takes. The important part is the lucidity of the experience. So if I do soul retrieval work, it doesn't matter if I'm doing it in that light state of a relaxed awareness or if I'm deeply in the focus levels or I'm fully out of body in an astral aspect. The data that still comes through is good no matter the form. So when you remote view, do you vary in the form that you do it? Do you always do it while physically awake, while relaxed, or do you still do any remote viewing that you're fully externalized into the experience?
Actually, But now, if you were to put a camera on me while I'm sitting in a room somewhere alone and I'm working on a target, I could be doing anything from polishing my shoes to drafting something. It it's a place in my head that where I let the remote viewing go to town, but I can use all kinds of other parts of my mind to do whatever it is I want to do. Um, it a lot of people say, well, that sounds an awful lot like it's coming out of your imagination, and in a sense, it almost is. Where it's actually being produced in my mind as I see it is this special like box in which I do the remote viewing. It's an area of my mind where I designed it just for remote viewing, and so in the relearning of the processing. In other words, that unlearning system I talked about, where you're learning a whole new system of processing. While that was being habituated, I was putting it in one place where I always go to when I do the remote viewing. So, and I did that for a reason. Um, when we were being trained to be better and better at it, one of the things that happened is I had a remote viewing, which was not a good one. It was a learning one for sure. Uh, sort of a practice remote viewing, and I failed it miserably. So as I was coming out of the remote viewing room, uh, I don't think it was Atwater. I think it was somebody else handed me a slip of paper, and it was about 2 inches wide and maybe the length of a full sheet, so maybe 12 inches long, 11 or 12 inches, and it had a list of 25 items on it. Thing in under it a little checkbox, and what it said was it started out with something like uh, birds were an irritant. I could hear them through the wall, something like that. And in a place you could put a checkpoint. And what they did is they wanted me to put my name at the top, date, the number for the target I just did, and then check all the boxes that got in the way of producing a good result. And my first feeling was, oh, that's kind of cute. And then I thought, oh, this is stupid. They're giving me a way of being irresponsible for the result. All I have to do is check some boxes, and then it's up to them to fix that. What are they going to do? Shoot all the birds? Or, it was like, no, these are excuses. So I asked the person who handed it to me, I said, who invented this? And they said the colonel did. So I went over to his office and I asked him straight up, I said, Colonel, did you make this up? And he said, yes. He said, I thought if you could identify the things that were getting in the way, you could take care of it. In other words, figure out a way to get around them. And I said, no, no. What this does is it gives me a very good way of bowing out and not taking any responsibility for my failures. That's not a good training tool. So I crumpled it up, put it in a gym basket. I didn't fill it out. And I said, here's the problem. It's the United States Army. And I had a lot of experience overseas. Nobody else in the unit had that kind of experience, I will tell you. So my response was, I could be doing a remote viewing next to a 155 battery. That's a big gun. Or I could be in a tank. I could be almost anywhere in the Army having to do a remote viewing. And it didn't make any sense to me to be looking or thinking about the excuses. Next to a 155 battery, when the gun goes off, if your mouth's not open, you bleed from the ears or the nose. So if I have to do remote viewing under these kinds of conditions, then I need to absolutely have to learn it the hard way. And it's kind of like a lot of people shoot a gun for target practice. It's not the same thing when you need to shoot a gun to stay alive. So uh, I told him I wasn't going to do that. That I was going to be able to either remote view at my desk with all the phones ringing and people talking to me, or it was of no value. And I don't know if he agreed with me or not, but that's what I started doing. I started not caring about the interference, but learning to go around it, to not be interfered with. So I got to the point where I could actually sit in a room talking to somebody while I was remote viewing a target somewhere else. And that has proven to be very, very valuable because I've done now a little more than 50 completely blind in protocol remote viewings on national television in 7 countries, and they've all worked. And I'm pretty proud of that because when you stop and think that, wow, I could have like 25 million people watching me right now, that's enough to unnerve anybody. It doesn't even cross my mind. I just go in and do the remote viewing, and that's where I am completely. And they can be interviewing me while I'm doing it. It's not hard for me. It would have been had I gone with the check the lot kind of thing.
Well, it's the proverbial cat tied up outside the monastery while the monks are meditating. And I can see the practical application of that. To me, that's the path of the journey of the ego, the journey of the master. It's similar with astral projection. When you start out on it, you need the full experience. You need the full technicolor out of body experience with the vibrations. You need to roll out of your
Right.
body to believe that it's happening. And
Exactly.
the further you get into it, it all kind of seems like bells and whistles because you find out you can project internally, you can project externally, you can do mental projection. You don't even need a body to
Exactly.
roll out. So I think that the ego needs that initially, but as you get further into it, you don't need that anymore.
Exactly. DOD came to me during my last 2 years in the Army, and they said, we want you to spend some time with Bob Monroe at TMI whenever you can. We're actually going to hire him to teach you how to control your spontaneous out of bodies. Because by that point, I had had 3 near death experiences, very close, and and I was having spontaneous out of bodies every now and then, but I had no control over them. So uh, DoD hired Bob to teach me how to control them, simply because the DoD wanted me to do a target while I was out of body versus using remote viewing. They wanted to make a comparison, I think. So it took quite a few months, but I would leave 11 o'clock at night from Fort Meade on Thursday after I did my last remote viewing, and I would drive to where TMI is. And Friday morning, I'd meet Bob in the lab at 8 o'clock. And then all day Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we'd work together trying to teach me how to generate, control, and out of body. And exactly what you said is what you have to learn. There's a system for doing that. And if you can't generate it, it's not going to happen. And once I was capable of actually doing that, controlling the generating of being out of body, then they gave me a target to do. Now, the problem I immediately ran into is there's a lot of distractions in the out of body state. And people ask me, oh, what do you mean? I said, well, if you're capable of even accidentally or with control or however you want to look at it, if you're able to separate from your body into the out of body state and you back into a huge crystal chandelier I can tell you what you're going to be doing for the next period of time before you're back in your body. You're gonna be sensing and being one with all the colors and the reflections and it's going to be a mind-blowing experience, and you're not going to go anywhere looking for a target. And that's what happens to me in the out-of-body state. um, I have experiences there that transcend anything else, so why do I care about a target? uh,
That's been my experience as well. When I'm out of body, my astral aspect is greater than my earth aspect, and it's generally not
exactly.
interested in what my earth self is doing.
Ta-da. Absolutely correct. You don't care because you know that's a whole different set of clothing. You don't have a job there like you have a job here. It's different. It's radically different. And in a sense, it's probably way more important than anything you would be doing here. We're here for a specific reason in physical reality. I think we're generating things that we can actually take with us, which I call experience. And so it's a learning thing. It's the reason we're here is we're finding out or we're discovering certain values, and those experiences are extremely important because it's sort of this is the result of a life. Now, there's an interesting part at the point of death that occurs. Now, I've been close enough to feel it. Where someone says, and then right at that point of death, I reviewed my whole life instantaneously. And everybody goes, "Oh no, wait a minute! You can't do that completely, like in just a minute." No, it does happen, and I think the reason it happens is because we can take experience with us, but you got to remember every decision and every action we made where we garnered some experience, it's only our personal perception. It's not all the effects that our decision making had on every other living entity. So, what happens at the point of death is you get the other 95% of that experience dumps into the matrix that you've created with your bits. It's kind of like uh, there's this framework you've created with your small little portion of the experiences. And right at the point of death, all the experience, that the other 95% of all those little bits fills right up. And it's the reason why we can say, "Oh, I just reviewed my whole life." And it was in an instant. But that experience is completely overwhelming, and it tells us something about possibly what it's going to be: good, bad, and indifferent. And we don't know what it's going to be in actuality because some things we thought we did for good will be having a bad result. Some things we did that we are remembering as being unfortunate or not so good may have had a good effect on people. We don't know. But when we get that huge download at death, it's kind of like painting ourselves because we're a total different entity, but we attain the color or the paint of whatever all those actions create. So I think that's where the decision on whether or not we should be uh, in what we might call hell or heaven, that's where we make that decision about ourselves. And and the reason I feel that way is I try to imagine with that fill in of all that experience in that matrix, how Mao Zedong felt when he died after murdering 30 million people just because he could. I mean, can you imagine how he sees and feels what he is after that, it must be absolutely horrible not be able to scrub it off. You understand what I'm saying? He's got to now spend whatever the new him is wearing that around and not being able to do anything about it. Or maybe you can by being reborn again, or maybe you can by contemplating on it for a few 100 million years. I don't know the answer to that because I never completely died. But I can tell you, I have this feeling that we are the summation of everything we experience, and we actually take that with us. So when you start talking about that kind of thing, and you start talking about part of your experience in like the out of body, just the slightest connection to that sort of thing is powerfully overwhelming. And so the experiences in the out of body condition are way, way more profound than you're going to have in the in body condition. Because in the in body condition, we don't know that we are all the people we interact with. I don't know if that's clear or not, but I just get a feeling that that's what it is. All the people we meet and interact with in physical reality, which isn't real, they're all projections of self. And maybe in a kind of an ordered way, we may reincarnate a multitude of times just to learn more about what it is to be whatever we are. So maybe we're the little finger of the creator, or maybe we're just a small figure in the algorithm, whatever that means. But it's profound. So the out of body condition is not, it is definitely not the same as physical reality, but it's profoundly different. And I just can't imagine using the out of body condition to collect intelligence. It was extremely hard for me to even contemplate that.
That's what I tell people. You're not going to be interested in looking up lottery numbers. You're not going to be interested in spying on your neighbor. It just would never occur to you in that form that that's something that you want to do. Do you still have OBEs today?
I still have them spontaneously. And in fact, since I started thinking like this, they become more structured, more oriented to, there's a similarity about them. And it's hard to explain. It's kind of like I go to the same place. It's not a street corner, but it's a place. And I can't explain the place, but I go there. It's the same place every time. And I meet another entity, which is an extension of me. I know that entity is. It's like looking in the mirror. And I get in this sort of, I don't know what, for lack of a better description, I'll call it a vehicle. And we go somewhere different every time. And the other me explains what it is that's going on when we're there. And so it's kind of like a learning thing. And then when I've gotten just about too much to continue understanding anything, I wake up. I'm dumped back in my body and I wake up. And I try to record what that is. Unfortunately, while I'm in it, I understand it. When I'm out of it, I don't. But it's changed me in ways I can't even describe. It's made me different. I have things now I could never do that I did before. I could never do them again. And things I try to do, which I don't completely understand, but are more positive or creative. It's hard to explain, but that's what I'm dealing with now. And I think it's just something I picked up from the out of body state.
That leads into my next question, which is, where are you currently with your spiritual journey? What's important to you now at this phase in your life? What are you exploring right now?
I'm trying to I'm trying to decide if I should if I've reached a point where when I see something that I don't like, I try to see why I'm seeing it in order to learn what I'm supposed to learn from it. But I don't see a reason for changing it, assaulting it, arguing with it, in other words, correcting it or anything else. It's just the feeling that I was supposed to learn something from it. And in that learning, it changes it completely. In other words, doesn't offend anymore. Um, right now, a lot of people are having a lot of problems with what's going on politically in the country, religiously in the country. Uh, they, just so many different ways. People are very upset and very confused. I'll put it that way. I see it as a breakdown of the old system because the old system had reached a point where it was corrupt enough it was no longer functioning the way it was designed to function. So out of all of this, what's going to happen is we're going to do a restructure or what you might look at as a reset. And the reset is going to fix the problems that caused this in the first place. So on the other side of this, it'll be better for everyone, not just this person versus that person, that sort of thing. I think things are going to change in a huge way for the better. And it's kind of like you have to crush the clay in your hands to make something out of it. And the clay that we're using is the old stuff that's been sitting on the table and it's gotten just really hard and is of no use. So we have to bang it around and break it up and remold it or re prepare it for whatever it's going to be used for. That kind of thing. I don't. I'm not reacting the way I used to react to things that make me sad or upset. I see reasons for it. I know that doesn't make any sense.
No, it does. It does. And Jose and I talk a lot about, in terms of just working on ourselves, working on our development as individuals, working with better people, um, and just doing the work here on ourselves
Yeah.
because the potential of society and the group can only get better if we evolve the self, the individual.
No, see, that's close to what I'm feeling. I'm going to tell you what I've noticed. Okay. Over the past year and a half or so, I've noticed, and it may be a result of there's just so many people now. We're all over the surface of the planet, and we all have basically a camera on our phone. I don't know if that's it or if what I'm actually seeing is a change. I I have seen on short little blips of film that people take with their camera interactions between us and animals, where the animals are displaying uh, like a new desire to be in connection with humans. In other words, they discover something that that needs help or needs to be fixed, and they bring it to us as a way of saying, if you can fix this, I'll care more for you. Uh, that's not a way of saying it, but there just seems to be improvement in the relationship between animals and humans for the benefit of the animals. So, what does that mean? Well, I saw something recently on the YouTube where a shark, I think it was, I don't know what kind of shark it was, but this shark, which are normally predators, had a turtle in his mouth. It was a pretty good sized turtle. And he threw it up on the back end of a fishing boat. And the fishermen, of course, pushed the turtle back in the water. That's crazy. Maybe he was trying to eat it. He ran into the boat. They didn't know what was going on. So they pushed the turtle back in the water, and the shark threw him back up on the backside of the boat again. And so the guy pulled the turtle over, and when he did, he saw this turtle had a band around its neck, probably the remnants of a net or something that he had swum into, and it was so tight he was struggling just to breathe. And so he cut the cord and pulled it off his neck, and he had raw sores from it from years, I guess, of dealing with it. So he treated those, and then he put the turtle back in the water. The shark did not put the turtle back in the boat this time, but the turtle wouldn't leave. He hung out by the side of the boat, and the guy had to actually reach over and pat him on the head and say, "It's okay now, you can leave." And the turtle swam away. That's almost like, okay, we got to live with humans, so let's let them know how we feel about them, or let's use the good human part, not the bad human part, or something. But it leaves the impression that the animals are getting better, more positive, more understanding to some extent for some reason. Humans, on the other hand, we're getting worse. We're not getting better. We're the attitude of human is becoming more and more out of control. We get angrier easier. We get fed up easier. We don't want to be involved in some way with others. It just seems like we're marking time and the animals are getting better. I hope that's not the case. I hope it's just the fact that a lot of people cover the earth now. We all have a camera. So we're now seeing these things that have been there all along. I don't know the answer to that. But I just know that humans don't seem to be getting better. Uh, we just seem to be marking time. I don't think we're getting worse. I think we're just reacting the way we always have, and missing the point, so to speak.
Well, the work starts at home, and I think that that's why the work that you do, the teaching that you do, is really important. And one of the common themes in your book, your memoir, is the importance of listening to that little voice inside. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that and the
Yeah.
experience of being a psychic intuitive. And I wanted to preface that with just a small story. So during our program at RV2 last summer, I got news that the lady who'd been my childhood nanny had passed away. So I made some plans on the way home to take this detour through my hometown to pay my respects at her funeral. It was only going to be for that weekend, but for some strange reason, I decided to extend my plans through the week. It's really not like me to do that, to take 3 weeks away from work, but something just told me it was a good time to spend that week with my brother's family. So about midweek through that visit, it was about 2 a.m. My brother comes downstairs to wake me up, and he tells me, my mom had just taken my dad to the hospital. He'd had a major debilitating stroke and was not expected to recover. So when he came downstairs and he told me this news, the only way I can describe it, there's this feeling in my head. It was like a clunk. Something clicked into place. It was this aha moment of, this is why I'm here. This is the moment that I was waiting for. So I wanted to ask you if that experience of listening to that little voice, is that the closest that people might resonate with what it's like to be psychic? Because I think it's common for people to look at you and go, that's very distant from me. That's very external. I don't understand that experience.
Well, see, I think the point we miss is the fact that we as human beings, when we actually uh, first appeared in tribes on this planet, very small sort of tribal groups, maybe 15 people at the most, maybe more like 10 or 8. But and we were pretty much related to each other, except for perhaps one person here or there that we might have found along the way that we brought into our tribe and kept because they were good workers or good hunters or whatever. Or maybe it was a woman we took from another tribe because, having a mate and producing more humans is sort of an internal drive that's just natural. For whatever reason, we had small tribes of people. The thing that people forget is in the beginning, we had no language. I mean, language had to be developed over a long period of time. So, how did we function in a tribe of 8 to 12 people and not have a language when essentially the stronger people in the tribe, it didn't have to be just men, but the stronger people in that tribe of people of 10, 12, 15 people, they by nature became the hunters because they were hunting animals that were extremely dangerous, some of them even predators. On the other side, the more gentler people in the tribe were the gatherers. These are the people who went into fields where they would hunt down different root vegetables and things, or take things from trees or dig them out of the ground that were edible and mix with whatever the hunters were bringing back to the cave, so to speak. But in the cave, we couldn't write, we couldn't speak, we could only paint our hands on the ceiling, that sort of thing. Um, if that's how it all began, then I can tell you we were all psychic, powerfully psychic. We could read one another like a book. It had to be that way in order for the tribe to survive. While hunting a dangerous animal, everybody spreads out around the animal. Everybody in that hunting group had to know what everybody else was doing, precisely what they were doing. Gathering, all the women in a field looking for root vegetables, and the saber-toothed tiger crawls into the brush. Every head in that gathering group would probably look to that direction, and they start backing up into a large group, large being 6, maybe 7 people, because there's protection in numbers, and so they're reading one another. Everybody's reading one another. The difficulty comes in when you have one small group mixed with another small group. If they recognize that they're of the same ilk, the same background, the same everything, and they choose to share a cave, what happens is if you're reading minds, the guy across the fire from you may be looking at your spear and really liking it, and you're reading that. Then he maybe looks at your woman and you're reading that. And so it creates an altercation where the 2 men go at each other and one dies, has to die because it's the strong survive in the beginning. So Mother Nature cannot deal with that. Mother Nature makes changes very quickly in a developmental way to guarantee the survival of the species. So there's a block of some kind brought into the brain that no longer prevents the free flow of that psychic information. Maybe it's in the callosum, maybe it's in the part of the brain where the ego develops. I don't know. But I am betting we have a filter somewhere in our mental capacity that in a sense, lets the really important data through, but blinds us to the less important data. It's the only way we could get along with one another. So being psychic is a retro capability that goes way back, hundreds of thousands of years, perhaps. It still exists, but what it's become over time is an imperative. Like when you're facing death, it's an imperative to keep you alive. So it's a survival mechanism. And so every human has the capacity, but if you're not in a life of threat, you never develop it, or it stays very rudimentary. It becomes one of those things where you're sitting in the room and you start thinking about that friend you used to have in 10th grade, and the phone rings and you answer it, and it's that person. In other words, psychic functioning becomes a spurious thing where we're suddenly focused in the right way that we see the connection. I can't tell you how many people I have observed in the classroom that when they're otherwise preoccupied, their remote viewing gets excellent. It's scary. It's so good. But it's when they're not completely paying attention to it, when it's spurious, when it becomes something that they actually suddenly see and they focus on. So I think humans are not going to become more psychic. I think we're becoming less psychic with every iteration because we don't need it anymore. We can Google an answer, or you can even do it with your phone. So you have everything available to you for decision making or protection. That's kind of a sense of it. Where in the beginning it was the ideal survival mechanism. Now, having said that, there are certain occupations in the humanity that requires being psychic. Just about anybody who spent 2 years in combat, I guarantee you, is going to be psychic, or they're not going to be here. Police officers who work undercover, FBI agents undercover, anybody that works alone in a hostile environment is going to be psychic, or they're not here. The same with firemen. Firemen operate in fighting a fire. They get their commands probably through your headsets or something in their helmets, telling them more water on this area, or do this or do that, and they react to that. But the real psychic function is when they all simultaneously know that if they stay where they are, the entire building is going to come down on them. So they all kind of back out of the building just before it collapses. That's not a knowledge thing. That's a warning thing. So there are occupations, even surgeons as an example. I've interviewed 3 surgeons who did exactly the right thing literally in a microsecond. And I've asked them, why did you do that? What was the thought in your head? And they said, there is no thought in the head. It just happened. They don't know why, but it happened. And they wound up saving a life in the surgical suite. So these things happen in a spontaneous way because we no longer have a need for them. I think it was discovered predominantly by the military, or people that were connected to the military were the ones who actually noticed the psychic stuff, the stuff where knowing became important. So they devised a protocol that has to guarantee complete blindness. Otherwise, it's not real. You understand what I'm saying? They had to put it into a protocol in order to prove it's real. They have to guarantee the blindness to prove it's real. And that's what they did, and others figured out a way of applying it. There's a more base reason why this stuff works, and that has to do with uh, things that we've come to know or understand about life and living that are imperatives, and they're in everything. I don't know if you want to hear about that or not, but
Well, talking about the protocol, that does circle back to something we were talking about before we started our call here. Were there any other RV misconceptions that you wanted to hit, such as, again, there is no formal training program for remote viewing?
oh, I have. In fact, I have a paper here. This paper, it's a formal Stargate paper. It's for the Star. It's from the Stargate archives. I'll show it to you. It was written in let's see, 20 to 23 July 2017. It was presented at the 60th annual convention of the Parapsychological Association. I'm a full member of the PA, is what the nickname of it is, the Parapsychological Association, and have been for almost 30 years. This is all scientific researchers, people who study the paranormal, either in lab formats or actually teach it at college levels. And this paper was presented because there's a lot of rumors about remote viewing that have come out, general population, over the amount of time since we were outed by the CIA on Nightline in 1995. A lot of people think it's just being psychic with a protocol. No, all remote viewers, of course, are psychic because they can demonstrate being psychic under controls, which is the protocol. Not all psychics are remote viewers and cannot call themselves remote viewers because they don't do targeting blind. Out of that general confusion, after the CIA released a lot of stuff, we have what we call mythologies of remote viewing. I can give you some of the fallacies. Um, Out of the SRI, SAIC research, and that's the two organizations responsible for the 1.8 million years of 8 million words of research on remote viewing. They made some interesting statements. Now, what they're talking about here is things that they've seen in blogs, articles, in videos on the internet. People have talked about in general in different clubs and things. The following is true about remote viewing, okay? They did not use telepathy protocols. They did not use OBE protocols. They did not, they are not part of or use of trances or mediums. They did not use spoon bending on the PK program. They did not explore teleportation. Did not use hallucinogenic drugs, mushrooms, sorcery. In fact, any use of drugs destroys the discipline of the mind and gets in the way. Um, did not use altered states of consciousness. UFOs, aliens, staring at goats was never part of the program. The program did not include any other applied remote viewing projects aside from those at Fort Meade and SRI and SAIC. Quantum mechanics, spirituality, consciousness, astral travel was not a part of the program. Some of the facts are this: the Stargate program was founded on the base of sound scientific principles. It followed a sensory-based physicalist approach. It is always double blind in its procedure, and it's used for all experimental work. Operational projects were assessed by intelligence analysts from the tasking agencies. Then on participation selection, the remote viewing training and methods. This is important. SRI remote viewing protocols developed by SRI team was used. Coordinated remote viewing methods developed by Ingo Swan may have been used, but were not actually training methods. AMSA RV protocol based on the SRI protocols were approved. Participants' innate preferred methods were up to the participants. What that means is if your preference was to wear shorts, a headband, stand on your head in a bucket of water, breathing through a straw in your left nostril, and whistle Dixie while you're doing the remote viewing, it's okay. That's your method. Okay. It still has to be completely, totally blind. In the analysis, they used fuzzy set technology for developing the target pool. That, in other words, they could tell you precisely what the accuracy was. Computer-based remote viewing targets generation and analysis was done as close to random as possible. Figure of merit method for remote viewing analysis was done. That's the exact percentage of what was right, what was wrong. Let's see. There might be more. Oh yeah, there we are. In terms of psychokinesis, they can neither prove it's real nor prove it's not real. And the reason why is the psychokinesis target will go off for almost any reason, whether there's a human involved or not. So because a human's sitting there does not necessarily mean a human did it. And the fallacy, one of the fallacies is the program was closed because key players started to leave the military intelligence careers behind them and they wanted to quit. Wrong. There was no evidence for remote viewing. That's also wrong. It was closed for a completely different reason. Let's see. There's just so much in this paper. You know, you can go to academia and ask for the paper. There is a really interesting thing that I think is in this paper that is even more interesting. This was not invented in a vacuum. There was, you know what an oversight committee is? An oversight committee is required when government work is done. Typically, there's a major oversight committee that keeps an eye on things and makes sure that you're following the rules. Remote viewing had more oversight than any other project in the history of the federal government. Okay? And I can give you an idea of exactly what that was. It was, now these are all committees, and they could red card the project anytime and shut it down. I want to stress one thing before I read you what these committees' titles are. Not one member of any committee believed in remote viewing. Okay? They all had to swear they had an open mind for it. The committees, I want to make sure I have all of them listed here. Remember, I said there were like one, possibly two committees for any other military project. Here we go. I'm going to read the names of the committees. Department of Defense Steering Committee. That was the highest oversight committee. These are in order of value. The Department of Defense Working Group. The Army Science Monitoring Team. The Army Surgeon General Human Use Review Panel. The General Counsel monitoring DoD and Army General Commands. The Scientific Oversight Committee. The Institutional Review Board of SRI and SAIC, and the Policy Oversight Committee, the Policy Oversight Committee point of contact on Congress and in the Senate. That's our oversight. We had, I think, 2 Nobel laureates in our oversight committees. So anybody that says it's not real is a fool. And I can tell you that, and I have a copy right here. This is what we call the mission log. I have the whole mission log for Stargate. So it was used by 17 out of 19 intelligence agencies in America. And it was all straight up remote viewing for problems. I don't remember ever seeing it go the whole time I was in it. And I was the first one recruited and the last one out the door. I turned the lights out when the project ended. So,
Speaks for itself.
yeah.
Well, that covered everything I wanted to talk about. Jose, is there anything else you wanted to ask Joe?
No, thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe, for being with us, and we really appreciate your time and all your knowledge.
You're
Thank you.
very welcome. One of the things that that I did want to say, and a lot of people don't even they don't know about this, and I've never written about it in detail, but I feel like it's probably going to be in my last book that I'm working on now. Out of the original 6 people, all but 2 of us are gone, and what people don't realize is in the Stargate program, the stress from the targets, which were predominantly life and death targets, where the stress is impossible to even speculate on. There's no way to demonstrate how bad that was because at the same time that we were working on life and death targets, many of the people accuse us of doing the work of the devil, told us we were going to burn in the fires of hell. Other people told us we were doing God's work, keep it up. Others said that we had no right to ever see another promotion. I was even brought before a general because I hadn't had a hardship tour in 7 years. What that person didn't know at the time was I had 4 hardship tours before I got into the project. So it was like being assaulted constantly for doing what we were doing, and all we were doing was trying to show what the threat was. And so I served with a number of people that were very, very good, and they were very, very supportive of the Constitution and America and everything about it. That was our single greatest guide was the Constitution of the United States, by the way. Because people asked us to do remote viewings, it would have been invasions of privacy or might have been targeting an American citizen. and we refused. So a lot of people don't know all that, and I appreciate the capability of being able to say it. Uh, I was really proud of many of the people I worked with. Uh, I was lucky. I survived it all, but it was a really hard job to do, and most of the people in it were treated very badly. Um, and I thank you for letting me be on your podcast. That's a real honor, by the way.
No, it's our pleasure. Is there anything that you wanted to promote? I know people know where to find you. They know about the Monroe Institute. They know about your books. But is there
Yeah,
anything?
no, not really. Just try to be kind to people because they disagree with you doesn't mean they're bad. We can learn something from all of the people we meet every day. Kindness goes a lot further than being nasty or disagreeable. That all humans are in the same boat, regardless of their wealth or their popularity or whatever. It's all the same thing. Um, I hear, I hear people talk about, well, I don't have a prejudiced body in my prejudiced thing in my body, or in my mind. And in fact, all human beings are prejudiced. Skinny people hang with skinny people. Fat people hang with fat people. Yeah, people that don't like liver won't go to dinner with somebody who likes liver. We all have those, and it's just a difference in one human to another, and it's no more than that. And we ought to get along with everybody.
Enough said.
Thank you. I had a good time.
Thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah.